It's finally time to get back to work on the 356. Yes.
Garage time.
Last time we left off on the 356, finishing up the front suspension. It's all really tight and precise, and so now it only makes sense to go through the steering and make sure it's also rebuilt. And so this is the device here. This is the ZF steering box. It's a worm and peg style device. Steering input is here from the steering wheel through a shaft, and then this is what attaches to the tie rods, goes to each wheel. And these are prone to wearing out. The parts are somewhat available, but difficult or expensive. So if this one's highly worn out, which it probably is, I have some extra ones. This one here, same thing. Hopefully it's in good condition, and if I don't get the parts I need out of that one, I have this one. Also another greasy ZF box. The way this is supposed to work, there is a spot in the middle. When the steering wheel is held in the middle, there's a spot that the steering gets tighter. So you should feel that as you're turning the steering wheel, you should feel a little tight spot. That's when the car is going directly forward. Because right now, if I hold the steering input locked, you can see how much movement there is. That's almost 1/8 of an inch of movement. So let's see if we can find the center position where it moves just a little bit less. This one has a lot of play in it no matter where the steering wheel is positioned. So this one appears to be pretty worn out. Anxious to see what's inside. I can't find, there's a flat spot that you're supposed to be able to line up with your steering wheel. I can't find it. So that either means it's really out of adjustment or it's worn out. The other thing to check on these before you take it apart is, is there any play in the shafts? This is the larger shaft, attaches to the wheels. I don't feel any play in and out. Let me get a screwdriver. There is some you can open it with a screwdriver, but it's under some spring pressure. So I don't know how normal that is. I've never taken one of these apart before. And then on this side, this steering coupler, I think this is an aftermarket steering coupler. It looks like it's got a Volkswagen part number, but these are also something that you should replace. If this was to fail, you lose all your steering, so you want to make sure this is good. This box here has the factory style steering coupler. It's all one rubber piece. It has some bolts that go through it. These are the correct locking tabs. You're supposed to have locking tabs on these bolts. This box didn't have any locking tabs. I don't think these are the correct nuts. They didn't use nylock nuts back in the 60s. Well, let's check this box and see if it has the same behavior. Now this one has a bunch of shims here on the large shaft. I'm not sure why there's shims in there. There's no play up and down. We'll have to look at the parts diagram and see if those shims should be there or not. So let's look for that flat spot. Okay, this one you can feel a flat spot right about there. That's where it gets tight. There's no play here in the center, and I can feel it in the steering input. It's just a small little shaft. From here to here, it's a small tight spot. That keeps the car going right down the middle of the road, and then as you're turning the car, there's additional play in it, not as much as that one has. There is some play in this one, but the wheels, because of the caster, are always trying to go to the center. So any of the backlash in the gearing, when you're actually making a turn, all the backlash is on one side because the wheel is trying to go back to the center. So you don't notice the play as much when you're turning, but you do notice it when you're going straight. This box appears to be in better condition. And then this one here looks like the casting's just a little bit different on this one, and it has a tag on the back. My original one doesn't have that tag. Yeah, lots of play in this one. We'll look for the tight spot. This one feels a little bit notchy. You can feel the gears inside. Yeah, I don't feel the center position on this one at all either. So this one's likely worn out. So I'm going to take some pictures and some notes, and then we'll pull these apart and see what they look like inside. I'm just looking for some markings of this arm relative to the shaft, and there is a mark here along with a mark here on this shaft. These are lined up, so that's a great reference on this. I'm going to see if they are all that way and take a picture of it so I can put it back together the way it was. And sure enough, there's a mark right there as well. I'm trying to figure out how to remove this locking tab, and I'd never seen one like this before. I thought it had some little bends in it to prevent the nut from coming loose, but after I look at it more closely, someone has ground this off. And what you're seeing is this is the nut, the castellated nut like on the other ones, but it's been cut off, and then this portion right here is where the cotter pin is supposed to go. This might have been used on like a dune buggy or something else. So this one is highly suspect. Because this one's been ground off, I'm just going to put the mark back in it so I know which orientation it was before I take it apart. So now I have a reference mark. I can always put it back together the way I took it apart. These are not the right sockets for impact, but I don't have the right ones. So if this doesn't come off easily, then we're going to go back to the conventional way. That was pretty easy. So there's one. There's a little bit of heat on here. We're just warming it up. We're not changing the metal, only warming it up. And I have this pointed away from my body, so if this does break loose, it's not going to hit me in the stomach. It's under a fair amount of tension right now. You're seeing me struggle a little bit trying to get this arm off the gearbox. And so when things aren't working well, I basically just stop. And I soaked it in this Kroll oil. This is a penetrant oil. It kind of goes down there in between the splines. Might loosen things up a little bit. And then I ran to the auto parts store and I got this puller. This is a Pitman arm puller. Ever Tough, it says, model number 67028. So my auto parts store lets you just borrow stuff for free. You pay for it, you return it, and get your money back. So I'm gonna try this puller. It's already soaked now for probably like an hour or so, and let's see if this works. You can see it just slides right onto there. Gets a better grip on it, I think. Oh, still stuck. It's getting a little bit more intense now. See if this will go through. So there's the puller on the steering box, and I now have this long bar attached to the arm, and that's going to allow me to put more torque on the puller. But I'm going to move outside now because I think it's highly likely that this puller might break. Let me get a towel over that. Yes! There we go. So sometimes those hammer hits just cause a lot of vibration inside the arm, and that allows things to loosen, relax. When it's under pressure like that, those shocks with the hammer can get it loose. I'm driving the chisel right between the shims, trying to put pressure, squeeze it open. Look at that. It's the shims. But now, we can go back to our puller. Hopefully get that in there. I think I'm gonna bake it in the barbecue just to get, I can't get enough heat in it with the small torch here, and I don't have an Aussie acetylene setup, so I'm just gonna heat the whole thing up and see what that does. It's the only thing I can think of. Okay, the third one is heating up still in the barbecue, so while that is heating, I'm going to take off the coupler on this one. That came off pretty easy. This one isn't a press fit. This one has a slot in it, so when you clamp the bolt down, it tightens on the spline. So this is luckily easier to get off than this one. Just knocking some of the big stuff off, and then we'll put this in some degreaser and let it soak. The one article I did read on rebuilding these, it did say to clean it before you disassemble it, because there are some delicate bushings inside, and if you scratch the bushings on disassembly, then it makes more work for yourself. So gonna clean it one way or the other, might as well clean it now. Now this is interesting. This is a little tag right here. That's probably an identifier, and that means this is an original box, never been taken apart. So I want to clean that in the degreaser and check it out. So I'm going to leave that intact. I barely saw it. Interesting yellow dot there. I think that's a factory marking as well. All right, I'm 3 for 3 on this steering box arm removal. The barbecue heat, it's pretty hot still. The barbecue heat was enough just to loosen it or allow the coil to go down inside or something, but I did crank it like another quarter turn and it popped free. Didn't get that one on camera, but it was behind the towel or blanket anyways. But the good news is I got it off. Whoever put those shims on, these shims right here, that made it impossible to use the puller until I had to like chisel those shims out. So whoever did that clearly wasn't thinking of me when it came time for rebuilding it again. There's 3 in a row, now cleaned up. This is cool. This is the, I guess, original lead tag. I think you can see there it says ZF on it. That's who manufactured it. This one has the location for it, but it's missing. And then this one here has the wire. I think this is it right here. This tag just kind of broke off as I was brushing it. So 2 of them have the tag. And this one has this feature right here. It's like a pointer. This one has it and this one does not. So this one appears to be missing that. From this view, this casting here is a little bit different. This one has the number plate on it. This one has a much thinner flat portion. Same with this one. This one's much thinner flat portion. So there's a slight difference in the casting between here and here. And I am seeing this is kind of the yellow marking right there. This one has the yellow marking right there. And this one has, I think, what's remaining of the yellow marking right there. My guess is the factory marked it yellow once everything was torqued and tested. That's just my guess, but it's interesting to see that. All right, the date code on this one is 5/11/63, and I don't know if that's November or May, but it's at least a 63. Probably correct for my car, it's a 64, so that date code sort of makes sense. This one here is 203.63, so again, I don't know if this is February or March, or if it's the 203rd day of the year, I'm not quite sure. But this is 63 as well. And then this one is totally different. It looks like a 66 to me. And then on this number plate, it says 566. So I'm not even sure what car this would go on because they didn't make 356s and 66. Maybe I can cobble something together out of these 3. Just a little bit of metal conditioner on that. It'll take off some of the rust. And I'm just gonna quickly go over it with a Scotch-Brite pad just to keep this surface really clean when we take it apart. This one here also has a mark. The one here in the middle has a mark on the shaft, and that happens to line up with this mark on this little indicator, so that's worth noting too. This thing you can rotate any way you want, the way it clips on, but those 2 lined up is important. Like I said earlier, getting that center position lined up with the steering wheel is important. So my guess is those marks help you do that. So we'll try to preserve that. This one's quite a bit more rusty, but I can see a mark. Very consistent, also lined up here with the indicator, the mark on the shaft. I'm going to slide this pointer off. It's very heavy gear oil. Throw that away. Also, it looks like some goopy sealant used on that surface. No gasket, just a little bit of sealant. Right, here's the internal condition of this worm gear. And I'm looking at it with a little reflection on it, and it seems really nice. I don't see any galling or pitting or scratches or anything like that. It looks really good. If you just catch the light just right, you can kind of see some shiny metal, but nothing real ugly. This one doesn't look too bad to me. Okay, I'm pleased with the condition of that one, and this was the one that felt the best. This was the one that had the tightest feel. So let's take a look at the other ones. I'm going to bag all these parts, make sure the bearings stay together. But let's take a look at the other 2, and we'll pick and choose the best parts for my car. Okay, this is the second one I'm taking apart. This one is the one that came out of my car. Starting by taking this pointer off. This is a pretty stiff little clip here. Oh, so this one doesn't have any grease or oil in it at all. It has grease instead. So that's interesting. Oftentimes when these boxes start to leak, instead of replacing the seals, they just fill it with grease, and the grease just, I guess, leaks out slower. Really nice coloring on the steel there, very clean, really tidy. This peg turns nicer than the other one. It's not bound up, but there's a little divot in the peg. Not bad, but it's definitely a little divot there. Nice and shiny though. Here's that spring, and then there's a little bit of, there's a few shims here, or it's like a plastic, I guess it's like a plastic spacer. No, they're shims. Yeah, a couple shims. The other one had some shims there too. They're just stuck together with grease, but I think there's 3 of them. Okay, now this one does have a gasket or a shim. That's interesting because I didn't notice that shim on the other one. And there's actually two shims here. That could be very important to set the preload on the worm gear. So that's worth keeping together. Make sure we take notes on that. This is the ball bearing race. Two pieces. One's a spacer and one's the actual ball bearing race. So it's important to keep these two together. And this slides straight out. Nice and tight fit on the housing there. That's good news. And then here is the worm gear. Now something I just saw, as I pulled this out, there's a washer sitting right on top of the gear. I have no idea why that washer would be unattached. It's a Schnorr washer. It's got the little teeth in it, but that should not be floating around in there. So that means either something's broken or someone else has been in here before. The surface looks pretty nice. This is the bearing that corresponds to this race on the end of this shaft. So just like that. This one has no oil in it or grease. This one's pretty much dry. It's a tiny bit coming out. The peg is turning. We'll pull this out. Comes out pretty easily. So if you can see me, I'm rotating the peg, and I can see one flat spot right there. I don't know if you can see the flat spot in the lights there, but looking inside here, you can see how clean or dry that worm gear is. And there are some spacers on this. It's not a gasket, they're like shims. So there's at least one shim on that one. Came apart clean. That should be the spacer. There's the spacer, and these bearings are just dry. It's almost like they're cleaned and not put back together with oil. So I don't know if you can see the surface of that worm gear, but it almost looks like it's been recently ground. All 3 are pretty decent. This one has the worst peg. It's got that flat spot in it, so we'll probably not use that peg, but it's not horrible, and I don't even know if you'd actually notice that. It's just gonna make it harder to adjust with the flat spot in it. Those pegs are available from Stoddard. They're about 300 bucks. Just that little tiny peg that goes inside the worm gear. So I'm gonna use the best out of the 3 and only have to order some seals. Now here's one of the housings out of the ultrasonic cleaner, and it still has, greasy residue on it. So it's gonna take a couple cycles to get this completely cleaned. Break down that grease and just polish it. But the bearing inside there looks really nice. I don't know if you can see, but it doesn't have any real galling or any show of wear. And the same is true for this side. The housing, to me, looks decent. Like, we can measure that, but the fit of the shaft and the condition of those sleeve bearings look pretty good to me. I'm gonna get a socket to push the seal out. I think we can get the seal out on this end. This one here is probably gonna have to get pried out, and that's gonna damage the seal, so. Here's the part right out of the ultrasonic cleaner. You can see that peg right there. Let's see if you can see that peg. It's nice and clean, spins really nice. I didn't even take the nut off. I was able to degrease it and clean it with the ultrasonic cleaner, so I don't even have to disturb the lock washer. This is ready to be reassembled. The only thing I need to reassemble it is the seals, of course. So I'm lucky, I just have to order seals. That's like a $20 or $15 item for both. And I don't have to buy any really strong rebuild parts. All the bearings, at least I can select all the best bearings, so I don't have to buy any new bearings either. They're pretty specialized for the ZF box. So luckily I was able to make one good box out of the 3. I'm happy to be working on the 356. 911 videos are going to be resuming. But the focus now is going to be kind of opposite the way it was. I'm going to be doing a little more on the 356 with sprinkling in of the 911. The 911's been doing great. I've been driving it and having a lot of fun. Take care.